When I was growing up, there never seemed to be a shortage of good movies, TV shows, and video games. I won't pretend that all of it was great, but on the whole, it seemed like the people making our movies and video games knew what they were doing for the most part, and it wasn't the fans' fault if something didn't do well or make money. I think most of us share Star Wars in common as a fond memory for what we grew up with. The prequels may not have been received as well as the original trilogy, but as a kid, it really made an impression on me, and I still like those movies to this day, despite their flaws. I remember watching Friends and 90s movies on our kitchen TV with a bowl of Fruity Pebbles or beef ramen. There were a ton of movies I watched growing up that still hold up well today, and it's really fun to be able to revisit some of those movies while my kids are growing up. I feel like I have to try to show them what I watched as a kid because I just don't feel like they have as many options today. It's not really about entertainment anymore. There's too much baggage, and I miss how it used to be. I also miss playing video games in the same room as other people. Most often, it was Halo, StarCraft, Super Smash Bros., or my personal favorite, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. I had one friend I'd play Spies vs. Mercs with, and I've never had more fun playing a video game than I did then. You should probably see how he's doing. It's been a while. These old games I used to play were more than just a fun way to pass the time. They were made to facilitate being with your friends in person, and alright, fine, that's mostly because gaming online wasn't really a thing yet, but let's be honest, multiplayer games online now are nowhere near as fun as it was playing in person with your friends. Playing online is just never going to feel right for me, even if it is as good as everyone says Helldivers 2 is. Without being able to play with friends in the same room as you, it's just never going to be the same. I really think that gaming as a whole peaked at that time. At least for me it did. There isn't much more I could say about modern video games because, frankly, I don't play video games that much to begin with anymore. When I do, I prefer story-driven single-player games like the last large title I played, Days Gone, which was fantastic, but it doesn't seem like there are many more options like that to choose from that are really worth my time in my opinion. Very few games have enticed me to spend hard-earned money to try them, let alone buy a new console for. This is all a long way of saying that I have pretty much moved on from Hollywood productions and modern gaming in general. If you feel like doing the same, I like to share with you what I've replaced them with, so you don't feel like you have to keep listening to YouTubers complain about Disney and AAA studios ruining everything you love. You can move on to greener pastures and have fun again, just like you used to. Just maybe in a new way. Be sure to let me know which of these sound like the best kind of escapism you'll try next, and maybe I'll talk about those more in the future. Number 1, tabletop games. Maybe you play tabletop games already, but I really want to make sure that you don't think Monopoly and Risk are what I'm talking about here. I want to make sure you know there's more than Settlers of Catan even. Maybe I just blew your mind there, but stay with me. There are tons of tabletop games to choose from, and when you buy one, you get to keep it forever. And while you're enjoying your purchase for as long as you want, you'll have a reason to invite your friends over again, assuming you have any left. What's even better is that it's a social, analog experience. I don't know about you, but my job is to stare at computer screens all day. And I don't want to unwind at the end of the day by staring at more screens. I want to do something tactile. I want to move models around. I want to look at something tangible. Sometimes I want that tangible thing to represent something I used to enjoy. This is why I like to play some Star Wars games like Legion, Armada, or Rebellion. They allow me to enjoy this franchise free from the political messaging, free from the lore being destroyed, free from Disney, sort of. It allows me to redeem a franchise like Star Wars in some small way. The scenarios that play out on the table can make these butchered characters seem cool again and not washed up, divorced, and sad. And if you can get into it, painting models is a pretty relaxing hobby. If that sounds nerdy to you, just remember that Henry Cavill is the patron saint of wargaming, so you can feel cool playing with your little toy armies too, just like when you were a kid. Number 2, anime. Now hold on, don't go. I'm going to approach this like you haven't seen any anime at all or very little, and I'm going to try to convince you that it's actually great, which is admittedly an impossible task because unless you're familiar with it, anime looks pretty weird. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that anime as a whole isn't going to be for everyone. But if you haven't watched a lot of anime, you might not be aware that anime has as many genres as Western entertainment, and maybe more depending on how you categorize it. It's worth mentioning that anime isn't a direct replacement of good old Western entertainment. However, given the choice between all of anime and all of Hollywood today, I would choose anime every time. It seems like the Japanese anime studios still value making good stories and are generally uninterested in pushing any political agenda. And that's worth something. General recommendations I could make would be Spy X Family, Hinamatsuri, Erased, content warning for this one, very dark themes. Suzume is a beautiful film that's worth a watch, and anything by Hayao Miyazaki honestly would be a very soft start into anime. If you want to start on something with a little bit more flair, Nichiju is a delightful little bite of chaos that had me thoroughly confused and smiling at all times. For a channel that has largely been dedicated to horror, you might be wondering what my horror recommendations in anime are. Surprisingly, I don't have many to recommend. Maybe Attack on Titan. It's horrifying, but there's much more to that show than the horror. I enjoyed Miruku-chan, which is probably the closest thing to actual horror I've watched in anime. As much as I like horror, I don't watch very much of it, to be honest. It's one of those genres that I'm very particular about how it's handled, and I don't think it's handled well very often. But another great plus for anime is that subscriptions to streaming services are quite a bit cheaper compared to Western media. And if you don't want to read subtitles, there are plenty of great animes with English dubs. The Kaguya Love is War dub, for example, is actually incredible, and it's a great rom-com to boot. Number 3, audio stories. This is where I get most of my horror from. I love creepypastas, SCPs, or even just YouTube channels like Mr. Ballin. At the end of the day, I just want someone to tell me a good story, and I think this is where horror as a genre shines the most. The trouble with horror in a visual medium is that your imagination is going to be a lot scarier than anything you can be shown on the screen most of the time. If it stays in your imagination, that's where I most enjoy it. Another great part of audio stories for me is that I can pair it with other hobbies. One of my favorite ways to spend an evening is painting minis with a scary story. I get a tactile activity, a great story, and a sense of accomplishment when I'm done. Number 4, go outside. I'll be real, I don't like going outside. But even for me, it's more appealing than sacrificing brain cells to Disney. I used to go outside when I was a kid, even though I had the Ocarina of Time and Ninja Turtles to watch. Maybe I was just a more balanced person back then. I still had friends I saw on a regular basis who I had shared experiences with, like collecting Pokemon cards but never learning how to play the game, or playing hacky sack or something. Maybe going outside doesn't feel like it has the same appeal because it just seems like there's nowhere to go. But maybe if we did, I'll start going outside again. Touch some grass and look for somewhere to go. We might find each other and have a real gaming session, just like we used to. Thank you so much for watching, and please do let me know what you're doing instead of watching Disney Plus and getting scammed by gaming companies. I'd love to discover new ways to pass the time. And if you don't mind, please like the video and subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.